SpaceX as a company is revolutionizing spaceflight and the way that we view the aerospace industry. In a course about reusable rockets, we really do have to talk about SpaceX. They are doing some absolutely incredible work, especially when it comes to reusable rockets. And when we talk about these reusable rockets, we have to talk about the companies that manufacture these. Why do they choose to do reusable rockets? What are their goals? How do they do it? How can you reuse rockets while keeping the cost low? Is there a way? Is there a special secret SpaceX sauce? Well, there almost is. It all comes down to some fundamental principles of economics, which SpaceX, especially its CEO Elon Musk, understand really, really well. The first thing that makes SpaceX so remarkable is the sheer pace of their development. They have managed to create a fully integrated company system, let's say. Their factory, where they actually build rockets, radios, parts, engines, and their main offices are all under one roof. So if you have the CEO making major executive decisions about the rockets, he can walk without leaving the building from his office all the way to where those parts will be manufactured, which hugely streamlines the process. And this gives them a rapid pace of development. Now, this might not seem remarkable, and in fact might seem a bit like common sense. But if we compare it to NASA and the way that their rockets are funded, they are funded by the government, by Congress. And Congress in the United States is assembled from all different states. So they want lots of different manufacturing things in different states because they want the jobs and the industrial growth that comes from these factories and these facilities and these research facilities. They want that in their own state. So you end up with a production line that is spread across the entire country, which is very good for each jurisdiction on their own, but not very good for the whole production ability. So that's the power of these private companies. If you can centralize everything, get everything built, manufactured, produced, designed, decided upon, all in the same building, gives absolutely phenomenal and fine, precise control over the production line and the research and development process. It's something that can be applied to anything, right? That's why many governments have their own city-based. I know here in Australia we have Canberra, we have the capital, which is designed specifically to be the centralized point for all government operations. The other thing that SpaceX does phenomenally well is, again, in opposition to government-funded companies like ULA, the United Launch Alliance, that constructs the more traditional rockets, non-reusable rockets. SpaceX does something really, really clever. They produce most of their stuff, almost 85% of their materials, in-house. They build the rockets themselves. They take the raw materials and they build it themselves. Now, this might actually seem a bit counterproductive. Why would let's say your company wants to put a radio on their rocket. Why would you make a radio? You have to research how to make a radio. You have to buy all the materials. You have to build a production line for it yourself. Surely that's more expensive than just asking the radio provider. Well, when it comes to rockets, these systems are incredibly complex. And the person who builds the radio, in fact, usually doesn't take the raw resources. They take parts of the radio. And so they buy the parts of the radio from other manufacturers, which mark it up at a cost. And then they take that in, and then they have to mark it up again, building up cost effectively. When it comes to aerospace, we have this interesting thing which happens, where if SpaceX builds stuff in-house, they can make their costs almost 10 times cheaper. 10, 20 times cheaper than what they could buy outside. Rocket systems. I use the radio as an example, but it's certainly possible that you could apply this to almost all rocket systems. And SpaceX does it for almost 85% of their rocket parts. Now, there's something else, a more company-based thing. This part isn't going to be too much about rockets. It's going to be talking about the company of SpaceX and how it really runs internally. So the last third big main thing is the long-term goal of SpaceX, which is something that is often underlooked when it comes to a company. When you say, what is Apple's final goal? Do they have a final goal? Is there a target in sight? If you joined Apple as a new employee, what would be your goal in the time there? It's something, I use Apple as an example, of course. I suspect they are quite good at this. They will have goals. But they're not quite as profound as SpaceX's goals. In SpaceX's offices, they have two big posters of Mars. One of them is a red Mars. It's almost a picture of Mars. Exactly what it looks like today. And the other one is a green and a blue Mars. And this is supposed to symbolize SpaceX's long-term goals. They want to turn Mars from this red, desolate hellscape that it is today into something that's green and blue and beautiful and almost a second Earth. The goal of SpaceX is to get a 1 million strong human colony on the surface of Mars. That's it. Now that's so precise and specific, it's almost like an engineering design requirement. It is so precise and so achievable. It might seem like a remarkable goal, but remember that SpaceX has been around since 2002, and they have already managed in the last 16 years to absolutely revolutionize the space industry. A remarkable achievement, starting from nothing and creating rockets that can reuse themselves and be able to construct parts that are cheaper, more efficient, reliable, and without the huge fear of failure, because every failure that SpaceX encounters is just another failure that didn't happen on the flight to Mars, right? If your rocket explodes because a hydrogen tank was out of place, or a helium tank, sorry, that's an explosion that didn't happen while there were people on board, or you were flying the first flight to Mars. So every time you learn, every time you fail is another opportunity to learn, and SpaceX absolutely takes this on board. And they tie it in very heavily with their long-term goal, which is send people to Mars. That is really the three main ways that SpaceX is hyper-efficient. Another last thing I want to touch on quickly is Elon Musk. The man is, for all of the controversy that surrounded him in the last year or so, the man is an icon in many, many, many senses. He's not very good at public speaking, but he has a fantastic ability to capture public imagination. And he absolutely loves doing it. And he's also incredibly intelligent in the way that economics works and how SpaceX and Tesla especially run. Elon Musk has incorporated his personal brand to SpaceX, which is why we often say Elon Musk sent a rocket to Mars rather than SpaceX sent a rocket to Mars. Elon Musk shot his car into space, which is an absolutely classic example of a publicity stunt for SpaceX. But that's enough talking about Elon Musk and SpaceX. And in the next part, we're going to get a lot more technical. We're going to talk about SpaceX's engines, exactly how they work, and why they are so damn good. This is something else SpaceX does phenomenally well. Their engines are fantastic. So, in the next part, we'll talk about it, and we'll probably touch on a little more about how SpaceX keeps costs low when it comes to reusability and fundamental economic principles. See you then.